Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we are exploring one of the wildest, most dramatic stories of the entire 20th century. We are going to look at the spectacular rise and fall of Benito Mussolini. It's the story of how one man took a completely broken nation, weaponized people's fears, and basically built the blueprint for a modern dictatorship.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. 1. A broken Italy. 2. The march to power. 3. Building the dictatorship. 4. The road to war. And finally, 5. The final downfall.
Now check this out. Mussolini didn't just accidentally stumble into power. He actually invented the word totalitarianism to describe his ultimate goal. Basically, he wanted the government to have total, 100% control over every single part of your life. What you read, what you do, even what you think. It's a massive power grab, and it perfectly sets the stakes for our story today.
Section 1. A broken Italy. Post-World War I chaos.
Before any dictator can rise up, there's usually a massive crisis. And Italy in 1918, completely exhausted. It was a perfect storm of 3 huge problems. First, Italy felt totally cheated by their allies after World War I because they didn't get the land they were promised. Second, the country was flat broke. Money was losing its value fast, and returning soldiers couldn't find jobs anywhere. And third, people were absolutely terrified of a Russian-style communist revolution after 2 full years of violent worker strikes. Just pure chaos, right? Which is the exact perfect moment for an extremist to swoop in.
So out of all this mess, Mussolini creates a brand new political system called fascism. What is it? Basically, it's a system led by a dictator that demands extreme, unquestioning love for the country, aggressive military action, and completely crushing anyone who disagrees with you. Mussolini mixed this intense national pride with a violent hatred of communism, essentially presenting himself as this tough guy superhero coming to save the day.
Let's move to Section 2, the march to power, exploiting the chaos, and see how this builds.
Mussolini knew that just talking wasn't going to cut it. He needed physical muscle, so he organized the Blackshirts. These were his private, violent gangs, and he used them to literally attack his political enemies and beat up striking workers. But here is the craziest part. Instead of throwing these bullies in jail, wealthy businessmen and even the police actually cheered them on. They were so terrified of a communist takeover that they just wanted the strikes to stop, no matter what it cost.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the massive gap between the myth and the reality of how Mussolini actually took power in 1922. The myth? Oh, he bravely conquered Rome, leading this glorious military army. But the reality? No way. He actually arrived super comfortably in a sleeper train after the panicked king had already handed him the job. Mussolini threatened this huge attack, but it was just a massive bluff. The real army could have easily swatted away his poorly armed gangs, but the king completely panicked, caved in, and just legally made Mussolini prime minister.
Section 3. Building the dictatorship. Dismantling democracy.
So Mussolini is prime minister, but he doesn't just flip a magic switch and become a dictator overnight. Nope, he spent his first few years cleverly breaking down democracy from the inside out. In 1924, a brave politician named Giacomo Matteotti exposed how the fascists were cheating in elections, and he was tragically murdered by fascist thugs. The public was absolutely furious, but instead of backing down, Mussolini used this crisis to completely crush his rivals. He banned all other political parties and set up the OVRA. This was a terrifying secret police network designed to spy on and arrest literally anyone who spoke out against him.
With his enemies out of the picture, Mussolini turned to the economy. His big goal here was called autarky. That's a fancy word that basically means a country makes absolutely everything itself and refuses to buy anything from other countries. To force everyone to do this, Mussolini used really aggressive military-sounding words, launching these highly publicized national battles to force Italy to be completely independent.
And this brilliantly illustrates how his fascist propaganda covered up some seriously disastrous reality. Take the battle for grain. The myth was that it was a massive success, with farmers literally winning gold medals for growing wheat. But the reality? To grow all that wheat, farmers had to rip up these beautiful, super profitable vineyards and fruit orchards. It completely wrecked Italy's ability to sell highly valuable stuff like olive oil and wine to the rest of the world. So it broke the economy, but hey, it looked fantastic in the local newspapers.
Speaking of newspapers, Mussolini was totally obsessed with his public image. He built this intense cult of personality that, honestly, feels a lot like modern influencer culture, just on a terrifying national scale.
He carefully staged this Superman image, getting his picture taken riding horses or flying airplanes. He also wanted to look like a tireless genius, so he'd purposefully leave the lights on all night in his office, just so people would think he literally never slept. He even set up youth groups to essentially train children to be tiny, unquestioning soldiers who were taught to believe that Mussolini is always right.
Section 4. The Road to War. From Strezza to Steel.
Of course, Mussolini wasn't happy just controlling Italy. He was obsessed with restoring the glory of the ancient Roman Empire through military conquest. So in 1935, he launched a brutal, heavily armed invasion of Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia. The rest of the world was horrified. They put economic sanctions on Italy, basically putting them in a global timeout by restricting trade. The punishments were actually pretty weak, but they made Mussolini so angry that he permanently cut ties with his old allies, Britain and France.
Feeling totally isolated, Mussolini needed a new friend, and unfortunately, he found one in Adolf Hitler. This was a super fast, disastrous slide right into Hitler's control. Let's walk through it. In 1935, Italy was still cool with Britain and France. But after invading Ethiopia, things shifted. By 1936, he allies with Germany. By 1939, they signed the Pact of Steel. This legally forced Italy to join Germany in any war, completely tying Mussolini's fate to Hitler's. When World War II kicked off in 1939, Italy actually stayed out at first because their army was just too exhausted. But in 1940, Mussolini watched France fall and thought, oh, the war is basically over. He wanted to be on the winning team, so he jumped in. And it was a colossal mistake. His poorly equipped military faced immediate, super embarrassing defeats in Egypt and Greece. Mussolini's big dream of this independent empire was totally shattered, and he literally had to beg Hitler to send German troops to save him.
Section 5. The Final Downfall. Collapse of the Regime.
Okay, we're into the action movie climax here. By 1943, the Allies are invading Italy, bombs are dropping, and Mussolini's absolute control completely shatters. Step 1. Realizing the country is facing total destruction, Mussolini's very own government turns on him and votes him out. Step 2. The exact next day, his own king has him arrested. But wait, Step 3. Hitler sends daring Nazi paratroopers in gliders to break Mussolini out of a mountain prison. And finally, Step 4. Hitler sets him up as the leader of a new puppet state in northern Italy. But at this point, Mussolini has zero real power, and Italy is dragged into a terrible civil war.
Fast forward to April 1945. The Allies are breaking through, and that puppet state is completely falling apart. Mussolini tries to make a desperate run for neutral Switzerland. He's hiding in the back of a German retreat truck, wearing a German military overcoat and helmet as a disguise. But, his fame was his ultimate undoing. A rebel fighter stopped the truck and instantly recognized him simply by his famous jawline. No way, right?
The end came incredibly fast. On April 28, 1945, Benito Mussolini was captured and executed by an Italian partisan firing squad. The dictator who had ruled Italy with an absolute iron fist for over 20 years was dead. His downfall was just as sudden and violent as the regime he had created. So, the crucial point is, what happened next? It's grim, but it's super important history. Mussolini's body was taken to a public square in Milan called Piazzale Loreto, and an angry crowd hung him upside down from a petrol station. Historians point out that while it is a very dark, graphic ending, it was this harsh, violent release that the Italian public really needed. It was their way to prove to themselves that the dictator was genuinely dead and the nightmare of fascism was permanently over.
This whole dark chapter of history really leaves us with a massive question to think about. How can free, democratic societies stop opportunists from using chaos and hard times to grab total power? It's something we absolutely have to ask. Because when a nation feels broken, people might be tempted to trade their freedom for just the illusion of order. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer to look at the real-world consequences of history. Keep asking questions, keep looking closely at the past, and I'll see you in the next one.